Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This time it's gonna be a Cultist versus Makhar battle report. So it's the battle that my opponent and me, we called it the Battle of Obscure Armies because there's are two armies that people don't generally use. So having this matchup someday again is gonna be quite lucky, I think. Because one condition would be that I would play Cultist because I never play Makhar, and I don't think I have the models for it. Even though I could use my Dread Elf models for it, but I don't know. For some reason, the army doesn't really tempt me, so probably I won't ever use it. So then, with my cultists, I would have to run into another Makhar army, which is obviously possible, but the chances are quite low. Yeah, so it's the first round of the Bloodstorm Return to Albion event. This was an event where you got a free giant every single round, and you had three different lists of 1,000 points each, and you randomly determined which one was going to be your main list for the event, meaning that that list would also supply your general. So for me, I'm going to be stuck with my cult leader on occultism as a general. My opponent was going to be stuck with his Taltos on the Dark Chariot as his general for the event. Yeah, matchup wise, I think this was quite a decent matchup for me with the Hoarders in my list. So the Hoarders are quite good for scoring. And yeah, the Makhar Lancers, they are cavalry, so they have a decent armor save, but they only have a 3 of armor save. In combat, I believe the shield they can use against shooting, but they have a Makhar Lance, which is two-handed, so they go to a 3 of armor save in combat. So I would estimate that my Hoarders can still grind down the Makhar Lancers. And also, well, I still have my magic to back me up. My opponent can do some damage with his Pyromancy, most notably to my cultists, but I don't really care too much about that. So it should be fine, I guess. Yeah, anyway, after that short introduction, we'll just go into the game itself. So at the start of the game, the camera recording is quite okay. And then later you will see that there's going to be some vibration in the focus of the camera, or some issues with the camera getting out of focus all the time. So then I have some pictures that I will just show you guys. Just for setup, this is a game where we don't set up in the normal way, so all of our units are going to be ambushing from turn 2 onwards, except for the giants and any units with either Vanguard or Scout. I don't have any Vanguard or Scout, so I don't have any special deployment here. My opponent has one unit with Vanguard, so they can ambush one turn earlier, already in turn 1. Because I play cultists, my opponent is allowed to choose table sites, and then while he is allowed to choose whether he wants a +6 or a -6 on the roll for table sites. So effectively, he can also choose whether he wants to be able to drop everything for first turn or not. In the end, I ended up on the table site on the bottom, and my opponent ended up on top. And I believe I got to get first turn, but I'm not entirely sure. I believe I got the first turn. So these very small point games, especially if you only have one model on the table at the start of the game, they are quite quick. So this was basically my first turn. I moved over my giant to a place where I could contest the objective, which was in the middle of the field. So it's a 6-inch circle going from the middle of the field all around, where we're going to be scoring starting from turn 3, I believe. Yeah, that's going to be the objective. The Giants, they have scoring 2 in this event. So you would need to have 2 scoring units to equal against one giant, or you can score an objective with a giant if the opponent has a scoring unit next to it. So that was quite a neat rule, I thought. It added some dynamics that I hadn't expected, to be honest, because then you try to claim an objective with a scoring unit, and suddenly the giant of your opponent can just pop up and say, "No, denied. This is my objective now." So in my second turn, I actually already got the entirety of my army on the board. So I was quite lucky with the ambush rolls. And then with the cultist, it also means that your unit cannot come up, and then within 12 inches you can summon a unit of demons. For me, these are the horrors, so I was able to put them in second turn, just right next to the objective already, which was really lucky for me. That was the main unit that I was concerned about not getting on the table, maybe. But it was really nice to just have the horrors on the table already in turn 2. Then turn three, I'm gonna be going into a position where I can score. I don't really want to risk my giant, but this is where you can see that it's quite funny with the scoring 2 on the giant of my opponent. So as I'm going first, I can't really contest the objective entirely, because my opponent basically can just move his giant to a position within 6 inches of the marker, and then he will score the objective for this round. And in the end, the points of the battle, they don't matter, so the victory points are not counted. It's just the objective points and also the secondary objective points, which are focused around killing the enemy giant and having your own giant survive. So my opponent could really put me on a back foot here by just putting his giant next to my orders and then evading the fight for at least one turn, trying to survive, and then maybe heading out with the giant. It's these small point games, you can't really block everything off, and I think going second in this type of scenario where you have to score zones is really advantageous. So I would rather have played second rather than first, but then again, my opponent forced me to finish deploying first, basically, because we only had one thing to deploy. Yeah, so that was my second turn, and the opponent's second turn, he charged with his giant and his horse cavalry into my hoarders, and I was quite okay with that. In the end, even the giant didn't make it, so that was even better for me, meaning that the horse archers were in the flank of my hoarders, and I was quite confident that I would be able to just grind them out. Because my orders, well, in total I still have 16 wounds there with resilience 5, so even if the horse archers, they have strength 4 on the charge, I believe, because they just have normal human stats and then they have a light lance. They have 8 attacks, they wound me on 5, so if the giant had also gone in there, my opponent still had some kind of a chance of dealing some damage to my unit. I don't really think he would have gone through the unit, but he would have had a bit of a chance of dealing some damage. With just the horse archers, it was not going to work. So I believe in the end I did have to take a break test because he had a charge in the flank, and I believe he did 1 or 2 wounds, and I only did 2 wounds back. But then, well, in my turn, I can counter charge with the cultist in the side of my opponent, and then, well, it's just going to be fine for me basically. I could have in this turn again just put my giant next to the objective, but I was a bit too afraid of losing my giant because I thought I had the game more or less in the pocket, in the sense of being able to get my giant to survive and being able to kill the enemy giant with a combination of the Breath of Corruption and Pentagram of Pain and the Hereditary, which is the Spear of Infinity for me. So I can deal out quite some ranged damage to my opponent, and I still have the Hoarders that can also chase off the enemy giant. The cavalry that my opponent got, he only got it in turn 3, so I'm not going to be too afraid of those, because by the time that they are going to be able to charge into my lines, I think we already decided the game at this point. So maybe my opponent can still draw 1 or 2 objective points, but that's going to be it. So this is the point where the flickering of the camera started, so I'll just go for pictures from this point on. So as you can see, my opponent, he was able to move up his cavalry, and he was also able to charge in the giants into my hoarders. So the hoarders are going to be ground down a little bit by the giant over time, probably. He also managed to charge away the cultists that I had near the objective. I believe he did that first with the giant, and my general is just far away from this unit, so I just have to test on discipline 6. I believe I just already failed the terror check, but I think I otherwise would also still have fled, because then my opponent at least had to take a redirecting discipline check, which he made, so he could charge into the hoarders, and then otherwise he has the chariot on the bottom. That is moving up to try and take some pot shots with magic at my giant. Then later we continue the combat against the hoarders. I have a couple of hoarders to drop. Otherwise, my unit of cultists rallies. My giant moves in to contest a little bit the objective, or at least possibly. And then in the magic phase, I don't think I do a lot actually. And afterwards, my opponent, I do manage to grind down his giant with my hoarders, because by now they also got quite a lot of grinding attacks. And then my opponent charges in with his cavalry onto my hoarders. Nearly everyone dies except for the champion, and I have AP 0, so that is not going to be a really successful story. I don't think I caused a single wound there. However, my giant is in a great position to countercharge. So in the last turn of the game that we played, I am countercharging with my giant onto the Makhar cavalry, and I am able to cast Breath of Corruption on my giant. So yeah, that was just the spell that I needed to go through basically. Because with it, I charge in, I am at agility 4, my opponent is at agility 3. So I can use my breath weapon and my 5 attacks before my opponent gets to strike. And the breath weapon already did, I believe, something like 10 hits and then 6 wounds. So that just already completely crippled the unit before the giant was even striking. And then they auto break, they broke away, and then they were either run down or I don't remember. I believe I just stayed within reach of the scenario just to be sure. And then that was the end of the game. So objective-wise, I believe we scored a kind of equal result, which ended up being a 2-2. And then scenario-wise, secondary objective-wise, I killed the enemy giant, my giant survived, so I got an extra 3 points on that. So in the end, the score was a 5-2 for the cultists. Yes, after game thoughts, I think I was just extremely lucky with the fact that my unit that could summon the Hordes got on the board the second turn. I think also on 1000 points, it's really valuable to have some magic with you, and then yeah, either I would have this mage or I would have another mage like the one with Thaumaturgy, which would also be fine, because then you either have a breath weapon each turn or Hand of Heaven. Hand of Heaven is also just still a really good spell at these low point values. And then otherwise I would have the Evocation Mage, then I would have taken Hasten the Hour for 3 wounds each turn. Or the Hereditary, and then yeah, you just throw a lot of dice on either of them and still your magic is going to do something. So yeah, overall it was just a highly enjoyable game with a really sportive opponent. And yeah, just scenario-wise, objective-wise, I think I'm off with a good start. My goal for the day was to just not end up lower than the 50%. So we'll see if that happened. Thank you for watching, and I will see you the next time.